when I sub out of the game, I think it's the same thing. I'm learning to detach. So we have something when athletes step off the floor, if their coach is really anxious or getting really upset or whatever, and we'll practice with the athletes. Like I'll put my hand on the shoulder and I'll look the athlete in the eyes and I'll be giving them feedback. I might start raising my voice just a bit and I'll cue them and I'll say, okay, as I'm doing this, can you feel your feet on the floor? Can you wiggle your toes? Can you press into your heels? Okay, so you're grounded. Okay, great. Can you balance your posture? Can you adjust your posture? Put your shoulders back, stand tall. Okay, great. Uncross your arms. Great. Can you continue to make eye contact with me as I'm speaking and nod your head? Okay. Right. So you're showing the coach that you're regulating. And guess what? A lot of times when the athlete regulates, what does the coach start to do? They start to co-regulate. So then I start to, oh, okay, cool. All right. I don't have to be so defensive and I can just have a normal conversation, So then what happens is they run to the end of the bench and then they have another moment to shake it off, to let go. A lot of athletes, like for my 20s, my whole 20s, people said, let it go, let it go. Why are you dwelling on this? Why is this something that keeps bothering you? Just let it go. And I'm like, I have no idea what that means. It didn't make any sense to me. So I studied that for a long time. But one of the things we'll do with the athletes is, shake your body out, move your body, jump up and down. And then once they do that, they breathe in, they breathe out. And they might do that once, twice, 3 times. And then they return to the bench, right? So you just airballed 3 shots in a row, or you turned the ball over when you shouldn't have. You're going through the process of letting that go, and bringing yourself back. And then when you sit on the bench, you're doing the same process you did with your coach, like, okay, sit down, ground, feel points of contact with the bench. Your sitting bones being supported by the bench, your spine being supported by the chair, Okay, you might need to stomp your feet again, wiggle your toes, press into your heels, and then you balance out your body again, uncross your arms, open yourself up. A lot of athletes, when they start to shut down, what happens to their body language? They roll their shoulders over, right? They get really small. This is the moment, this is the test. This is the freaking test, man. This is where you evolve to a whole nother level. You have all this stuff going on. And guess what you can do? You can open your heart, which is the toughest thing to do. As one of the, great spiritual teachers that I've followed for the last 5 years, he talks about putting your heart in hell, Ram Dass. That's what you're doing as an athlete. And a lot of people, what they do, and I do it sometimes too, is you close that thing and you let nothing in because you don't want to get hurt and you don't want to experience pain. So when you sit on the bench, open yourself up. And then we'll do something with vision. So we'll use vision to regulate, because a lot of times when you're in fight or flight, your vision shuts down, it narrows. So we'll put both thumbs out. I don't know if you can see, both thumbs out like this, straight ahead, and then we'll look straight, and then we'll start to slowly widen, and where I can see my thumbs and my peripherals, right? We'll have other different exercises that we'll play with for vision, but it's important to have a consistent routine that athletes can go to, and then it's the same thing. Like I can take you through when they sub in, I talk to our athletes all the time, especially our pro guys. Like our head coach, man, he's amazing. Like he's an amazing coach. He knows the game and he's got a great feel, and he'll look at you. And if you have one hesitation or, you get small for a second, he sees that and he's going to lose trust in your ability to perform. So you have to be on your stuff. You have to be ready to perform. You got to do the work, but you got to present yourself that you're confident. Even if you're feeling a little shaky, you got to present yourself as confident. So an example would be like when the player steps on, gets called, right? They call the name to sub in. I'm going to freaking run to the bench or the scores table. I'm going to run to the scores table, and that's part of my activation. That's getting me back in my body. And then when I get to the scores table, I don't care about the scores people behind me. I want to be respectful, but I need to go through my process, and they may miss the game for 5 seconds, me doing this. So I'm going to jump up and down. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm getting back in my body. I feel my feet, the vibration going through my body. I can feel that. Once I do that, then we take a powerful breath in through the nose, out through the mouth, do that twice. And then we return to normal nasal breathing, breathing deep in and out through my nose. As I breathe deeper into my lungs, what's happening in my body is the cooling, calming chemicals like dopamine and serotonin are being released, right? If I'm breathing through my chest and I'm breathing fast through my chest, you've got cortisol and adrenaline, filling your body. So just recognizing some basic things about human physiology is another way athletes start to be able to, regulate. We're giving them an education. And I think if we can work with the players and we can teach them these things about how to regulate their systems, man, that's going to really impact the game, because a lot of these players are going to become coaches or trainers. And, at a young age, if you can really cement these tools, form those grooves in the brain, I feel like, the game is going to continue to move forward.
100%. So just as a way, you just dropped a ton of wisdom. So I want to try and recap it. Like, I feel like the number one, you dropped a ton of tools on just how to become physically present, how to like relax, get out of fight or flight, right? You shared, different ways to the breath, right? Feeling your feet on the floor, right? Using a visual, right? With my thumbs, just to make sure I lock in. I'm getting out of my head. And it's like these activations ways of when the coach calls me, right? I'm sprinting to the bench so I can kind of start to get going. And then I take my deep breath and then I'm ready to go. So as a coach, like when I'm teaching some of this, it's the best place because I feel like games provide that opportunity of when you fail, how to reset, right? You're going to have to reset a lot. I'm curious, I feel like this is a good opportunity where we can almost build this into our practice, right? When you fail in practice, right? What is that? So can you give like some, kind of build on what you just said as some concrete examples of how coaches and even players that are listening to this can be like, okay, this is how I can practice it in practice. And then the game is the test. It's going to test my, my mental ability, which is a skill.
Yeah. I mean, ideally, first you have the coach introducing and giving some of the education on the physiology and those kind of things. I think that's really important. And then ultimately, as you go through the process, using cues, and giving the players opportunities to practice. I've worked with a few different coaches, and the challenge is always and I used to be like this all the time. Like my practices would be chaos. Like they'd be let me reword it. It'd be organized chaos. Like I would get our players doing, these drills where it was fast and quick and they had to make all the decisions. And it was always like to the minute, we are on top of our stuff. And if we don't get it, that's all right. Come back to the next day. But so I think there's times and practices where we need to be able to slow down and understand that all learning, it doesn't have to happen in chaos. Sometimes we need to slow down to process and try things. And I've done workshops for athletes all over the world, and that was some of the initial resistance. Like our practices need to be fast. And now as I slow it down, it seems like the athletes are getting worse, right? Because they're having to think a bit and experiment with the tools. So I think there's also like if you're interested in this kind of stuff, there's some patience that you need as a coach, but also as a player too. Like, it does take some work, some back and forth because you're tuning into your body. And if you've never done that, if you've been numbed out to your body, yeah, man, it might take you, at least a month to start really seeing the progress that you want to see with it. So yeah, that's something simple. I think in terms of like failing in practice, is that the question? Like failing if I'm making mistakes and stuff like that?
Yeah. So just like opportunities, giving them opportunities to practice their, mental reset in practice.
Yeah. So I think you can start off just by cueing. And we say a lot of times, we'll say gear down. So gear down means like, hey, this is a dead ball. We're going into a timeout. This is your opportunity to go through your routine. So I would use that trigger word within practices or workouts. And ultimately, I'd start to back off and I'd cue less. And then I'd ask questions after and say, hey, like, were you able to, regulate when this happened? Or how was that for you when you went through that? Were you focused? Or, 1 to 10, what was your focus like today? Or how present were you? So I'd ask those questions after to check in and see if they felt like they were using their strategies. Because I think, Justin, like as we move forward with coaching, It seems like a lot of people are leaning into they're leaning into scaling their businesses, and I'm all for it. Like if you want to, make money and build your business, I'm doing the same thing. I'm building my business. But I think also recognizing that, man, what works for you, Justin, may not work for me. So like I can give you like 15 different tools in the moment about how to handle failure, but that may not click, and that's part of the patience of being in the mental performance coach, or in the more mental performance coaching, or just a basketball coach in general. So what I'd say is that the key concept, the underlying foundation to this whole thing, is, are you giving your athletes opportunities to have conversations, to figure out what's helpful? What are they already doing? Like some athletes already may have a few things that they already do and that has helped them find flow or perform at high levels. And they just aren't as aware that, hey, when I did that, you know what, this actually really helped me. Maybe that's what we need to do and focus instead of introducing new tools, increasing the frequency of their consistent routines, or you know using, I don't know, mantras or breath work techniques. And then there may be athletes that just have no idea where to start. They've never had success. Then you can start making suggestions, as I've said a few times.
100%. Yeah, I like how you kind of just guide them, right? Help guide them. Provide a space where whether I find that when I'm working with them, I also we work in a small tight gym, and then a lot of times we're sharing the gym. So I feel like if we can get our group in a classroom or a quieter setting and give them that opportunity and space, whether they're you know journaling about it or they're partner sharing, it's an opportunity for them to really think about, okay, when I scored 30 points this game, or when I had 10 rebounds this game, this is what I did before the game. And this is kind of my mindset. And so just kind of helping guide them along. And then we can, like you said, provide them with a little bit of a menu. Like, is this something you can explore?
Absolutely. That's what I say all the time. The menu is the key, That's what we did with our athletes, with our professional team this summer. Like I gave them, 5 or 6 pregame meditations that I did with them in person. But at the end, the guys that have been, because our season's so short, so we don't have a ton of time. But for the guys that started at the very beginning, I was able to say at the end, okay, how do you feel today? Like, what do you really need? Okay, this is what I need. Okay, well, what do you think about doing this meditation? Let's do it. Boom. And then we'd bang it out. And then, the athlete would perform and do what they do. So that's, man, that's the key, man. It's like, I just think about myself, and I'm a pretty stubborn individual. And I think anytime anybody's really pushing something on me, I've just always had resistance. So I'd rather someone help guide me than push anything onto me. That's just my personality, and maybe that's why I coach the way I coach.